Namaste. So wonderful to be with you. I wanted to share a little bit more on the theme of triggers. So hopefully you've watched the first video, which was a part of my 1108, the antidote transmissions. But I wanted to add a little bit more context around why it's so important for us to work with triggers at this time. So the first thing that I want to say is that, so when I was explaining, the initial trigger comes up and then we have all of these other triggers that then pop up that kind of distract us from this original trigger. That in itself, that whole cascade it's very natural reaction for us. It's very normal for our internal system to feel the need to protect us in that way. And what we are now doing when we are changing and creating this new dialogue with this internal world, we're actually reorganizing things. We're coming back in, we're saying, you know what, now with my newfound awareness and willingness, I want to be back in the driving seat. And so all of you parts that have been working so hard to hold this space in the system, you don't need to do this anymore. Now, we're not saying to the parts in our system, you don't need to be here or your job's not important. What we're saying is, now that we have this awareness and willingness, we're ready to be back in the driving seat and take up the responsibility of many of those jobs that those parts felt that they had to do, because we were in a state of non-remembrance. We were maybe in a state of being with our false sense of self, thinking that we were our mind. And so soul wasn't around so much to hold that space. And so yes, those parts of us had to do all that work. So we're coming back into this different kind of relationship. And that process takes time. And it takes energy, because these parts that are coming up, that are running the show, they feel that they've had to do that. And they take a lot of energy to do that. So they're draining a lot of energy from the system. And so on a day-to-day basis, if we're feeling fatigued or we're feeling like, I just don't feel like I have the abundance of energy that I could do or that I used to, it may be because a lot of these parts are very activated and they're taking up a lot of the energy that will be utilized for other purposes. And again, this is natural and it's not bad and it's not wrong. I'm just trying to explain to you the inner workings of the system. And so often when we do this work and we start to give these parts that are coming up the attention that they're looking for, we work with them, we dialogue with them to ask them to relax, and ask them to just sort of start to develop a little bit of trust that I've got this and that I can work with this and they don't need to be so activated all the time. And the more they do trust and they lessen their own triggers, they relax their own triggers, we will find that we will have more abundant energy in our system. And this is the thing for me, this is very much a part of why I do what I do, and I bring these technologies in the way that I bring them, is because I've worked on the front line in the community, doing youth and community projects, working with some of the most marginalized and vulnerable people. And I know, I can see that there's still a lot of work to be done. And there aren't necessarily any more of us, and there isn't necessarily any more money to put into projects, and there isn't necessarily any more time. So what's got to give? What's going to give? Because we're all burning out doing this work, whether we're doing community work or we're doing healing work, we're being there for our families, even just being a carer in a family. We've got to be able to do things more effectively. We have to be able to utilize our energy wisely and effectively to stop the channels of energy and attention, to cease those unnecessary channels of attention and energy. But it's not like we can't just go in and cease it and be like, right, that's done now, because that's another type of suppression. it's a process, it's a journey of bringing these parts on board, getting into the new dialogue and getting them to relax. And then those things naturally dissolve and cease on their own. We're no longer needing to fuel an overly anxious part or a worried part or a stressed part that's just constantly there in the background, being triggered at every little thing. So those dissolve, those cease on their own. And we find that we have more and more energy, and then we're able to do this work. And it's not just about those dissolving those old energies and getting those old parts to relax. It's about preventing us from defaulting back into those ways of being and thinking, because as those parts relax and we clear our old stuff, again, we no longer have attachments and bondage to those old ways of thinking, of reacting, of being, because we've learned, and those parts don't feel like they need to react or be that way anymore. So then we find ourselves that we're not needing to put our energy into any unnecessary avenues. We're not further loading ourselves up with stuff that we have to clear. So we become more effective. We can then utilize the time that we have, the resources that we have, the energy we have to actually achieve better impacts, better outcomes, whether that's working on the front line in the community, doing healing work, working in our families. And that's how we're going to overcome the challenges that we face as humanity. That's how we're going to solve the big problems of the world, is simply by being clever about how we utilize our energy and being really upfront with ourselves on where our energy is going. So there may even be old lines of energies going to old lovers, old friends, weird contracts that we've made. We can all allow those to come under examination and sever those ties. That's why Kali is so useful and important, to sever those bondages, those egos, those attachments. Other kriyas, Reiki practices, breathwork practices that we have that can detach energetically, emotionally from the old stuff. So important. So the triggers are just so important in this time because we've got shit to get on with. And the triggers are an important place to start doing our work, because this is what's taking a lot of energy. These are the trailheads that we start at. This is step 0, is willingness. Step 1 is noticing. Step 2 is acknowledging. Step 3 is noticing what other triggers are coming up, working on those. And then we go back to the initial and we work on that. So we begin always with what's arising for us. That is the technique that I will use in my internal family system psychotherapy sessions, and sometimes in a lot of my coaching. We start with what's arising, we start with what's there, we start with that energy, and we follow the trail of that. So when you find yourself coming into that part of you that's like, I'm confused, I don't know where to start or where to begin, I don't know what this is about, simply remember to just acknowledge that's arising, but then go back. Let's find that initial trigger, or call in that which is present with you right now, even in this moment, and go from there. Triggers are also so important because our blind spots, right? Our blind spots are there. They're wanting to be healed. Those blind spots are like the things that about ourselves that we don't see. And often our most fundamental triggers are related to these blind spots. And so if it's taken us a while to notice a trigger, and then you finally notice it and you're like, oh my gosh, I've only just realized that's a trigger. It was a little bit of a blind spot. And when we become more aware that we have blind spots, then we can search for other blind spots. And when we find those blind spots, we can examine what triggers are around that too. And these blind spots, again, no need to make anyone bad or wrong. They're not bad or wrong. They're simply just kind of like blurred vision almost, gaps in our vision. Maybe parts of us didn't want us to see it because we really needed those behaviors or those emotions or those reactions. We needed those to be able to like get ahead and to be able to survive and protect ourselves. So the blind spots that we find and the triggers that we find, it's important to really pay attention to what job and what role they were playing. Not just the blind spots, but any triggers. To pay attention, what role was that trigger playing? Because it was protecting you. And we don't want the system to feel even more vulnerable and exposed now. It's like, okay, we're going to remove this trigger, we're just going to throw it away. No, because it had a job to protect us. And so we need to honor that and examine that and dialogue and negotiate with our internal world. Okay, well, what else can we do to protect ourselves? What else can we do other than perhaps reacting in that way, pushing that person away? You know, that's often a trigger, and then I'm a trigger that didn't like what you said, it really hit a nerve, I didn't like it, and so I'm just going to push you away by spouting something out at you. Push that person away. Anger, frustration, fear, whatever, that's the reaction. But actually that whole reaction was a protection. And so, okay, yes, we could refine our behavior, but the fundamental still maybe remains, potentially for that part. It may take that part of us a while to be able to release that. And in the meantime, we've still got to be able to honor that it still feels that it needs to protect us. So we can be more vigilant, you know, we can assure that part that I think I've got this. I will be more vigilant, and I will maybe remove myself from those situations or negotiate whatever needs to be done to have that protection there. Such an important time to be working on our triggers, you know, like ultimately if we're coming into the new way, we're creating the new world. The way that we do that isn't by umming, ahhing, does it have this in it, does it have that? Maybe we could do, let's pray for it. The way we have this misunderstanding about praying and manifestation, like we'll ask for it and it will come. The way to create is to simply be it, is to visualize or create intentions of that which we are creating in its fully actualized, fully realized, fully potentialized form. So we see it already created, already abundant, already powerful. And then we beam out that energy ourselves. So we embody that. And then that's what the universe reflects back at us, because that hologram matrix out here is a simulation, it's a program that is created through our consciousness. We create it. And there are simulations within simulations within simulations. The simulations in our minds that are going on, that are creating this identity, this whole world that we believe exists. And then the simulation that we project out here, and the simulation that everyone's creating together. So when we start to say, this is the world we've created, that's what is going to be reflected back to us. So in order for that to happen, we got to work on our triggers, you know, we got to work on that stuff that's like, ooh, that's uncomfortable. Ooh, I don't believe that. Ooh, you know, all those fears, those doubts, those insecurities. It's the trigger that comes up that alerts us to that. So if we're working on our triggers, it means we're working on the stuff, the deeper stuff. Because if all you're doing is like pushing the trigger aside and being like, I've worked on my trigger, it's no longer here. First of all, it doesn't mean that the initial root of the trigger, which is a burden, a trauma, or karma, it doesn't mean that that's like been like given any time of day or worked with. It just, you know, and second of all, you've just kind of pushed it away and passed it off to yourself that like you've dealt with it. So what is it that you're really doing? What is it that we are really doing here? So let's work with our triggers in a way that means we are working with the fundamental root that's beneath it. Being in that integrity, that sincerity, that integrity of what and who we are, of this path of conscious awareness. The integrity that we have as a student of this university. Work on the trigger and you work on the root. And you do that in the moment and you do that in the day and it magically does its thing. And then we are clearing those fundamental blocks to the belief that we can manifest this reality. We're clearing those fundamental blocks to being able to sit and give it time and beam this out. We're clearing the fundamental blocks that are questioning everything, doubting everything, afraid of what will occur when we are this powerful. And then we can fully beam out and create. We can beam out that vision because there's nothing in the way of that vision. There's nothing in the way of the belief that we are healed, that we are free. For you to be able to inspire fully in somebody else the belief that they can fully heal, you've got to be able to believe it too. Otherwise, what are you inspiring in them? Are you inspiring in them an idea of a belief? An aspect of the belief that you can fully heal? Are you inspiring them a fully embodied belief of liberation from imbalances of the physical vessel, the mind, the emotions? I hope you've enjoyed the part 2 to the triggers talk. Have a beautiful day, and I will tune in with you, no doubt, soon. Namaste.